Okay, good morning, established guests of the global energy community. We have an exciting webinar for you today based on the Arctic region. And we do know that the Arctic region is a modern space that has rigorous confrontations between interests of the leading world powers. And this is because the prize is a great one. On one hand, it promises transport arteries that are capable of connecting three quarters of humanity, whereas on the other hand, there's a huge reserve of a large number of different resources that are biological, mineral, and energy. Today, we will find out what challenges the states that are responsible for developing the Arctic region and what potential opportunities it has from our independent energy expert, Anton Sokolov. Thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha, for inviting me. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to share my thoughts, my expertise, my understanding of the issues that we have in the Arctic region, the global energy community. I believe it's really important because the Arctic is the last line of reserves that we have, and that the untapped reserves. I mean, and sooner or later, we will need to go there because our need for energy grows every year and every day. And we will go into this region sooner or later. But we will need to do it responsibly and in sustainable manner because the Arctic region is a really fragile thing. It's a really fragile, both from biological and also from the environmental point of view. And the Arctic region is also of great importance environmentally because the processes that are going there, they influence the countries that are thousands and thousands of kilometers away, like India, for example, or Brazil. And that's why we need to be sure that the Arctic resources, so they are produced with all due respect for the environment and for the fragile for the fragile environment of the region. So I would like to start with the definition of Arctic. So what Arctic is? Uh, Actually, if you ask an average Joe in Russia or in the United States and Canada, or even in a country which lays far far away from this region, like Brazil or Argentina or I don't know, Australia. Uh, each and every person you ask, they will tell you what Arctic is and how it look like, where are the borders of Arctic region, who lives there, and so on and so forth, what resources we have, and so on and so forth. But when we come up to politicians, and so the things becomes really complicated because the thing is that in Russia, in Canada, in Denmark, in Norway, we all have uh, different perspectives on where the borders of the Arctic region are and what the Arctic is in general. And when you talk about resources, of course, one of the cap rocks there is the shelf, the Arctic shelf, and by now, three countries have submitted their addendum to their applications to the United Nations in order to expand boundaries of their continental shelf zones. It's Denmark, it's Canada, and it is Russia. Some people believe that um, such addendums and such applications, they bear some um, threat Russia or to Denmark or to Canada. But the fact is that the process of approving these applications, it takes years, like not just like a year or two. It's for Russia, it was like 20 years. Our application was reviewed uh, and actually approved by the United Nations. Also, some countries like United States, they're not following the United Nations Code and Law of Seas or UNCLOS Convention, and that's why they could like do it unilaterally. Like recently, the United States unilaterally expanded the borders of their Arctic shelf. But the thing is that it takes years, and years of mandatory consultations and talks between the submitting states, between the countries, because this is like the provisions of UN Convention on the Law of Seas uh, suggest. Also, when we talk about, but why everybody is so interested in the Arctic shelf? Because of course it's a storehouse or warehouse of hydrocarbon resources. For Russia, it's more of a gas storehouse because here we have like in the Arctic region, and we have like more than 75% of our gas reserves, and almost all the production of natural gas is conducted in this region. The share of oil is much more modest. It's about 20% of all reserves and slightly less than 50% of all domestic production are concentrated here. And for gas condensate, it's something like half of the reserves and more than 60% of the production that comes from this region. I will talk more about Russian reserves, but actually you could extrapolate it to Canada or the United States or Norway. But the thing is that I will show you later that in Russia, this region is much more well studied than in other countries, and that's why we understand to a deeper to a deeper extent the resource potential of this region. So actually, not only Russia, of course, Russia is not the only country which produce Arctic hydrocarbons. Worth mentioning two more countries, Norway and the United States. Here you can see in these pictures the peculiarities of each and every regions of hydrocarbon production. So in the left picture, you can see Prirazlomne field and the ice-resistant platform, Prirazlomne, which is in the Pechora Sea. It's the southeastern part of the Barents Sea. Here you can see that the ice conditions are really heavy, and actually a lot of ice comes into the Pechora Sea from the eastern part of the Arctic Ocean. The next picture is the Goliath platform, the Norwegian platform. You see that not so much ice here, but still the Norwegian production on the Arctic shelf faces a lot of challenges and difficulties. It takes both Goliath platform or Snøhvit. They have a lot of technical challenges and a lot of technical difficulties that do not allow Norway to raise its oil and gas production from the position where it is for the last maybe 5 or 7 years. And the last picture, it's the United States, Alaska, the American sector of Beaufort Sea. It's Nikaichuk Field. Here you can see that it is the hydrocarbons are produced from either from the shore or from the artificial islands because the ice conditions are so heavy that there is no way we could use any drilling rig or platform to put offshore in such conditions. As for Russia, we have something about 10 oil fields discovered in the Arctic shelf on the Arctic shelf. The same number, a little bit slightly less number of gas and condensate fields. But we need to underline the fact that all these fields, they are located in the western part. I will show you why in a couple of slides. Actually, the western part of the Arctic, the Barents Sea in Russia, accounts for most of the exploration and production licenses. By now, the oil production is carried out only at one site. It's Переразломное field. Another big discovery, huge discovery, the Победа field, it still remains a project with really unclear prospects because especially because of the current conditions, because costs are too high, oil prices, exchange rates clearly unstable, to put it mildly, and poorly predictable. And also, in addition, they have a number of technological issues like the need to conduct a seismic exploration, additional exploration of deposits in general, the possibility of attracting foreign floating drilling rigs and seismic survey vessels. Also, the need for ice-breaking services also, especially when we talk about the eastern part of the Russian sector of Arctic Ocean. It's a must, the ice-breaking service, and it also increase costs greatly. But also there are another examples. It's Canada and Greenland. We know actually that the Canadian Arctic shelf is splendor in resources, and it was known as early as the first quarter of the 20th century. And after the oil crisis of 1973, the extensive exploration work began in the Arctic archipelago, in the Beaufort Sea. But despite the fact that the oil and gas potential of the region was confirmed, harsh climatic conditions and weather conditions did not allow for sustainable oil and gas production. No long-term production projects were established in the Arctic archipelago. But at the same time, the Canadian experience in the development of Arctic reserves has allowed us, so all the other Arctic producing countries, to find optimal solutions in terms of winterization processes. I will expand about it a little bit later, about the design for floating drilling rigs, for platforms, for how to protect them from ice loads, wind loads, wave loads, and so on and so forth. Another good example is the Greenland and the Greenland shelf. In fact, the U.S. Geological Survey conducted the research, and they expressed an opinion that the Greenland shelf, especially the eastern block of the Arctic, of the Greenland shelf, should be really rich in hydrocarbons. And the first wave of interest for the Greenland shelf was in the late 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. But actually, you can see on the graph, the Brent prices stayed really low, and is not allowed for huge scale exploratory work. But when Greenland required more independence from Denmark, which happened in 2008, 2009, and in 2009, Greenland gained some extended rights, extended independence under the Denmark's rule. So they started to invite American, Canadian, European companies on the Arctic shelf in order to get in order to start the projects, to develop oil fields, and to get the money to actually fuel their independence. And because of the prospects, because the prospects were really bright, a lot of companies came there, and a lot of licenses were given out. But the fact was that the Greenland Shelf was studied. I think it's more thoroughly than any other region in the North Atlantic, or maybe in any other ocean. But the thing is that all the drills, all the wells that were drilled on the Greenland Shelf, the wildcat wells, they were dry. So none of the wells allowed for production. And you can see that when the Brent prices were really high, some wells were drilled, and the licenses, the total number of licenses issued was also high. But as soon as the Brent prices went down, the companies started to return these licenses, and drilling on the Arctic shelf, on the Greenland shelf actually was stopped. And later, I think it was 2022 or maybe 2023, the Greenland announced that they, due to ecological concerns, they stop issuing licenses for oil and gas production offshore. But it's questionable, actually, whether it's due to ecological concerns or whether it's just of inability to produce actually to develop these vast resources. It's a question. It's a question. And also, this situation shows us that even the brightest prospects, they could be ruined in reality because the conditions there are harsh. And sometimes our estimates, our calculations, they could not be proved in real life production and development. Okay, but so how much oil and gas is there in the Arctic? So speaking about Russia, the latest estimates were made in 2018, 2019, and the total value of Russia's mineral reserves on the Arctic shelf was approximated at $22 trillion. It included 12 billion tons of oil and almost 50 billion cubic meters of natural gas. But take a look at the seismic survey map of marine and offshore waters, and you will surely understand the reason why we could not be certain about the volume of reserves. You see this black spot in the western part of Russia's Arctic zone. It's the Barents Sea, and you see that these are the seismic profiles. A lot of seismic profiles. They are very thick, very dense, and that's why we know a lot about the resources and reserves in the Barents Sea. Not so many, not so many, but a little less dense seismic profiles we see in the Kara Sea to the east of Novaya Zemlya. And when we travel to the east, to the eastern part of Russia's Arctic, we see that there are just single seismic profiles. So we could not certainly be sure about the potential of the eastern part. It should be actually splendid, but in reality, we will talk about why there are not so many seismic lines a little bit later. But so this is what I want you to remember, that when we talk about Arctic and Arctic reserves, we usually talk about really really small spots in terms of if we compare it with an Arctic Ocean in general, or with an area of Arctic Ocean. But what about these were the known reserves, the discovered reserves. But what about the undiscovered reserves? The U.S. Geological Survey that I have already mentioned estimated something around 4 billion tons of oil and almost 30 trillion cubic meters of natural gas within Russian Arctic zone. But as we have already seen on the examples of Canada or Greenland, this vast potential sometimes is really hard to put into the production numbers, in the numbers of wells drilled or tons of oil extracted or cubic meters of gas extracted. And why? Why it happens like this? When we talk about offshore fields development, we talk about a lot of challenges. But when we talk about the Arctic offshore fields development, we should consider the fact that the Arctic is the area of limitations. We have limited time because open water window is really really small, some like months. Limited amount of exploration data because of the limited time we have to gather this data. Limited mobility due to ice, also design limitations of drilling rigs and platforms. We need to consider the ice conditions and wave loads and wind loads and so on and so forth. And also infrastructure constraints that could be actually the last nail into the coffin of any Arctic project. Here you can see some examples of what I'm talking about. The first picture, it is the project of the intermediate helicopter platform for the development of the Stockman field. The Stockman field was discovered on the Russian Arctic shelf, and it's really huge. Just to get you the perspective of how huge it is, of how much resources it has. Just a single fact that we could use gas, natural gas from this field to cover all our planet's energy needs for something like 18 months, just from one field. So the resources, abundant resources, but it's like 500 kilometers away from the shore. So we need some additional infrastructure, very costly additional infrastructure, like intermediate helicopter platforms, floating bases for vessels that will service the stop and field production, and so on and so forth. And that's why the international consortium that was gathered to develop Stockman fields had put this project to a stop. Another thing you can see here, it's ice-resistant drilling rig, which is towed to a drilling point. Pay attention to the unusual contours of the body, and it is made so in order to provide protection from ice loads. And actually, this is the design we get from the Canadian experience, because they experimented a lot with like unconventional designs, like in the shape of an egg or round shape and so on and so forth. And of course, when we talk about Arctic offshore fields development, of course, we talk about the increasing costs of equipment, because we need to winterize it, we need to protect it. But also Arctic projects, they face other problems. Usually it's poorly developed infrastructure, significant remoteness from populated areas. These factors, without any doubt, affect the logistics of personnel, materials. Also, it affects the possibility of delivering raw materials, especially at the early stage of the project. If we're talking about offshore production, then in addition to the cost of the project, it is necessary to consider the need for the icebreaking service and also the maintenance of the auxiliary fleet for the platform. It could be as much as 20 ships, 20 vessels that we need to provide service for the platform. If you are referring to the onshore fields, then of course we need to prevent the melting of permafrost because it could have catastrophic consequences. All these things, all these measures, they require additional costs. And of course, the cherry on this cake is the fragility of the Arctic ecosystem, as I have mentioned in the beginning of my speech. So companies need additional costs to ensure the safety of the project for the environment at all stages, starting from exploration to drilling, to production and to transportation of extracted natural gas or oil to consumers. Speaking about the winterization, the word that I have mentioned like maybe 10 times by this point. How do we fight ice and low temperatures? Of course, Arctic conditions are always low temperatures, strong wind loads, and in order for people and equipment to work normally in such conditions, it is necessary to perform a number of winterization procedures that will protect structures from wind, icing, and cold. In any case, an Arctic drilling rig will cost more. Depending on the manufacturer and model, the price increase can range from like 15% to almost 50%. And I think even more, actually, when we talk about like really, really unique projects. Like, for example, offshore structures. Because for offshore structures, in addition to winterization and reducing the area of open spaces, it is necessary to ensure their protection from ice loads, wave loads. So we need to select materials, calculate the contours of the platform body, equip it with the ice-breaking elements. And since both drilling rigs, floating drilling rigs, and even more platforms, they are unique and extremely complex structures from an engineering point of view, it is quite difficult to determine the range of their cost. The lower limit is known; it's something about $1 billion, and the upper limit is determined just by the wishes and the possibilities of the customer. And here I would like you to give some examples. So the first existing and prospective solutions. Here you can see the Scarabeo 8. It's the Saipem drilling rig, the Arctic drilling rig. You can see some winterization options here. You see that the drilling rig itself is closed with some metal sheets that protects the personnel from wind, from cold, and you see that the almost no open areas because all the operations are conducted within the enclosed areas just to protect the equipment and the personnel from the low temperatures and wind and so on and so forth. But if we look at, I don't know why it's GSF, it's JBF Arctic platform by Huisman Equipment. It's the Dutch firm, I believe. You see that it is even more winterized, almost no open structures, open spaces, and all the structures like drilling rig, they're closed, totally closed. And another thing is the promising ice class drilling vessel. This is the project of Krylovsky State Scientific Center here in Russia, but there was a number of such projects throughout the world. maybe 4 or 5 promising projects, but in fact, currently only one company is producing Arctic-ready drilling ships, and not in huge quantities, as you can understand, as you can imagine. Um, and that's why, and we need these Arctic drilling ships, Arctic-ready drilling ships, but we do not have many of them. Something like maybe less than 10 currently. What about ice-resistant designs? Here's the example of Prirazlomная platform, and also some project for LNG Arctic storage that was done by a Russian design bureau called Monolith. Um, you can see the similarities between between these two. So we have some. What is the what I would like you to bring to you, take from this slide, that we have some project, of course, and currently we have some drilling rigs and vessels and platforms that are Arctic ready, but not so many of them. And if you want to go into the Arctic extensively, so we need much more of them, and this is the challenge. So, but speaking about Arctic resources, of course, it's not only oil and gas. We have talked a lot about oil and gas, but actually, here is the example for you that we could use Arctic, the territory, for implementing nuclear power. Like here you can see floating nuclear power plant Academician Lomonosov, or we could use an energy of wind energy. It's Kola wind farm located in the Kola Peninsula near Murmansk, in the Russian Arctic zone. And also electric ATV, which is given here. It is not from the Arctic; it's from Antarctic. But I would like to say that we could implement such solution for the Arctic region. And here you can see 2 maps. It's for Russia, but I think that you could easily find such maps for Canada, for example, because they're also interested in implementing renewable energy sources, renewable the energy systems that are built on renewable energy sources in the Arctic region. So the top map shows the mean wind speed throughout the year. And you can see here that the Arctic region of Russia is really well suited for wind farms. And the bottom map shows the solar radiation. Of course, for the most part of Russia's Arctic, solar farms would not be a solution, but you see in the eastern part of Russia, it's Republic of Yakutia, the power of solar radiation is quite high. And actually, in Yakutia, we have a lot of projects currently of small-scale solar power plants that are used as a support or addition for classical energy solutions, diesel generators, and so on and so forth. But whatever country we would choose, whether it's Russia or Greenland or Canada or the United States, the Arctic energy systems in these countries, they will face almost the same challenges. The first one, it's lack of unified system of energy producers and consumers at the macro-regional level, due to low population density, of course, and due to low industrial density in general. Also, weak development of transport infrastructure, and I'm talking about ports, bridges, roads, strong dependence, of course, on supplies from the mainland. Also, whatever country we choose, actually, the development of Arctic territories are usually conducted in the how to say, focal spotlight manner. So we have some spots where we do produce something, or where we extract some minerals, or where people live. But for the most part of the Arctic region, Arctic territories, uh, they are undeveloped, absolutely undeveloped. And of course, a significant proportion of heavy energy carriers with large carbon footprint in regional energy balances. It's either coal, or diesel, or tar that they use for generating energy and heat. And of course, if you talk about fragility, I don't think that it's like a proper answer to the question of sustainable development and keeping this fragile ecosystem intact. But also, when we talk about Arctic resources, of course, it's not just energy. Of course, it's also transportation routes. And here, I would like you to get the overview of the Northern Sea route, the Russian transport arteria, which is being popularized for several years right now. The NSR had certain opportunities. Yes, it's like the quickest quickest way from Asia to Europe. If you do not consider ice, fogs, and so on and so forth. What are the difficulties? The difficulty is not even the open water, because in the eastern part of Russian Arctic, as I have already told you, the open water window lasts for 3 to 4 months. The main problem is depth, because the depths there in the straits of on the Northern Sea route are really shallow. The maximum depth is 55 meters, and the shallowest strait is just 12 meters, the 12 meters deep, which renders large container ships unavailable for this route, because they just could not use it, and we need some smaller size vessels and smaller size. They will carry twice less containers, and they need um, some Arctic class, ice class, to be able to navigate in these waters. And this means that Northern Sea route, we need to consider these challenges. It's not just to claim it the second Suez Channel or something. As for the Northwestern Passage in Canadian waters, in the Canadian Arctic archipelago, you see that the depths there are uh, really astonishing. It's like 400 meters maximum and 70 meters minimum. So, and the average depth is 200 meters, but the open water is just 4 to 6 weeks. Uh, and some years it's 0 weeks, because the ice uh, the ice just don't come off. And also, here I would like you to pay attention to, okay, TPR, just to finish this, is transpolar route. It's currently unavailable because ice cap, the Arctic ice cap, is still in place. And I would like you to pay attention to this diagram. This is the Arctic ice area from the U.S. National Ice Center. They have like more than 10 years of um, research on how the Arctic ice area changes. And you can see that despite the claims that the Arctic ice is melting rapidly, we see that in a 10-year perspective, in a 10-year perspective, it remains more or less the same. And this claims that the Arctic ice is currently melting, and soon we will be able to tap into the hydrocarbon reserves in the high north and use transpolar route. They actually came from the beginning of 2010s. And you can see here that, yes, actually, the Arctic ice area during those times was at the minimum level. But now it returns into normal range, and it's really hard to say whether we ever be able to use transpolar route, for example, or tap into the reserves that are really in the higher latitudes. Okay, but apart from this, the thing that concerns me the most is that currently the main regional trend is the steady growth of conflict potential. We have seen that the international relations they're degrading, even in the Arctic, which remains the area of collaboration, the area of friendly rivalry, I may say, since the 90s. Also, the alienation of Russia, also in the Arctic issues, the ongoing militarization of the region, actually from all participating countries, and Russia and the United States and Canada. The newcomers in the region, they're not from the circumpolar countries. I mean, China, also India, who are really interested in the Arctic region, but also as well the European Union, Great Britain, and so on and so forth. So, and the struggle for region resources intensifies, and this is what really bothers me. So here I have some copy outs from the newspapers and news sites. And you see that this tension is growing, and this is what really bothers me. This trend is becoming stronger every month, actually. So, and speaking about this conflict potential, if you took for example our neighbor, the United States, the Arctic neighbor, I mean, they have a lot of Arctic strategies, but only recently they had some the Arctic strategy for their government, but they for almost a decade they issued some military Arctic strategies for Navy, for Air Force, for the Army, and so on and so forth. And what bothers me that in these strategies, a lot of is being said about Russia and China, and it seems like the bad guys for the regions are found, because here you can see some extracts from these strategies, and this, of course, reminds me of the Cold War, and when our countries um, try to deter each other, not to cooperate, not to work with each other, especially in such a fragile region as Arctic. Hopefully, this trend will be broken. I hope in several years, but this race for the Arctic, as it is called in the Western media, of course, it's a pretty dangerous trend. I would like to underline it once again. But speaking about the cooperation projects, so here are the examples of the red line is the Arctic Circle. Blue, these are Arctic projects, and yellow rectangles, it's the energy project that we have with BRICS countries. Here, what I can say? So Russia, India, China, we all have like a proven record of collaboration in militaries, in science, in technology spheres. But what about energy? Unfortunately, this cooperation, especially in the Arctic, is not that immense as we could as, as, as we could imagine, because the usual cooperation is just the investments in the oil production or gas production. But our countries, I mean, BRICS countries, we have like the expertise also in some other spheres, energy spheres, that could be useful for the region, like renewables. If you talk about China or India, it's renewables. It's deep marine drilling. If you talk about Brazil, for example, it's nuclear power. If you talk about Russia, and so on and so forth. And I think that actually, if we want the Arctic region to be developed in a sustainable manner, of course, we should not focus only on oil and gas, because yes, these are profits, the immediate profits, or like profits after 10 years of starting the project. But we should not forget about other opportunities that the Arctic region brings up to the table. Actually, this is all what I wanted to say about Arctic. Maybe my speech was a little bit unstructured, or you know, hectic. But I hope that you have the understanding, like at least at the basic level, the understanding of what the opportunities and what are the challenges of the Arctic region, and what role could it play in the future of the energy development of our planet. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for sharing. This has been a very informative presentation. I just have some questions for you. And the first one is, are there any environmental considerations when it comes to the Arctic for energy production and development?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Are there any environmental considerations when it comes to the Arctic
Yes,
for
yes,
energy
of course, of
production
course, of
and
course.
development?
Yes, of course. If you talk about producing oil and gas in the Arctic, of course, the environment is considered. And in fact, the Russian legislation is really strict when we come to producing oil and gas in such fragile regions. And actually, this legislation is not just present, but it works. And if companies allow some oil spills, even minor ones, they're usually severely punished. I mean, in terms of money, of course.
Okay, thank you for answering. And the last one is, what are the current research and development efforts focused on improving the Arctic?
So sorry, what are the
What are the current research and development efforts that are focused on improving the Arctic?
currently the main projects, of course, they are focused on hydrocarbons, of course. It's Yamal LNG, the well-known project is, of course, it's Arctic LNG, which is currently under construction. But as I have already said, there were actually a number of projects like Pobeda Field or Stockman Field, but due to the challenges and limitations, the financial and technological and infrastructural and even like climate limitations of the region, these projects were either stopped or put on pause, as I can say. Also, yes, but and by currently the other projects like renewables or nuclear power for the Arctic, they remain like minor things. I hope this will change in several years, especially in the nuclear power field, because in the nuclear industry, because currently Russia is working on small modular reactors, as well as the United States. They are working on small modular reactors on this technology, and this technology will allow for building really small scale solutions for hard to reach regions like in deserts, in mountains, in Arctic, and so on and so forth. I think this will be the long term tendency, but for the nearest future, the most projects they will be, of course, hydrocarbon. They will be focused on hydrocarbons development and production.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering. This has been such a wonderful presentation, especially as someone that doesn't know too much about the Arctic. It's been very informative. Thank you once again for sharing your information with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Have a good day and goodbye.
Goodbye.